WHGE 95.3 FM. Coming up, the open eye. Quite there. What is wrong with this thing? Hey man, what's going on in here?
Don't have another
over slavery, which wasn't right, but they got the gospel when they got here. And you know what? I bet you there's a lot of Africans that had to be won over. Not saying it was right. Don't misunderstand. Not to justify in slavery the situation, but God, I still believe, used it. And now I'm sure there's a lot of Africans that got the gospel, and they're in heaven right now because they got the gospel. You know, what would be better? For them to have lived their entire life in Africa free, doing their voodoo or whatever, and then die and go into hell, right? Or what happened? And then they go to heaven. They get the opportunity. Now, again, it doesn't justify it. The ends do not justify the means, but this is how God works. This is what God does in the Bible. And we got black people here. I don't think any of you guys were ever slaves. I mean, I was never a slave. It's like, oh, you know, white privilege. You were never a slave. You were never living during a time, unless you're very old, like 60 or 70 maybe, or 80 years old, you're never even living during a time where segregation was a thing in this country.
All right, give me a little minute.
I mean, what are you crying about? Nothing even happened to you. You're just making up stuff. You can't look at the facts that I was reading and just attribute that to some kind of white privilege. It's not real. Get over it. Quit having all the excuses. Why don't you take some responsibility for your choices, be content with whatever situation you were born into, and make the most of it. God's not limited in your situation. He can do above, what we ask or think.
Nope, it won't work. God damn. Yeah. Come on.
Those of us that acknowledge you were committing intellectual we do so because the chains of oppression in our people's minds are deep and difficult to remove.
Good morning, my children of the sun. Welcome to the Open Eye on WHGE 95.3 FM. Excuse me, having a couple of technical difficulties with the computer here. All right, but I'm going to go ahead and get them started. I'm probably not going to give you any musical breaks today. I got to get it going. All right, turn that down. All right. Let's get them going here. All right. Every generation has its purpose. Ours is to reveal the truth and reverse the brainwashing. And that's what we do right here on the Open Eye. Let me start here. Welcome back, y'all. Welcome back to the Open Eye, where we don't squint at the truth. We stare right straight in the face. This is a space where history isn't buried. Power isn't protected, and propaganda doesn't get a free pass. If you're looking for comfort, you might be in the wrong frequency. But if you're looking for clarity, if you're ready to understand why the world looks the way it does and who benefits from keeping it that way, then you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Because every system tells a story, every headline has a silence, and every crisis has fingerprints. On the Open Eye, we lift the veil. We connect the dots. We name the forces, foreign and domestic, that profit from confusion, division, and despair. This is for the thinkers, the truth seekers, the people who know something is wrong, but refuse to be lied to about what it is. So take a breath, open your mind, and remember, once your eyes are open, they can never be closed again. This is the Open Eye. Let's get into it. All right. Hey, Rhonda, I see you, sister. Let's talk truth for a minute, all right? You know, something happened, and I was so proud of the way black people handled it, okay? Recently, a video has been circulating online with a young Arab woman claiming that Arabs are descendants of ancient Egypt. Like I said, I love the response that black people gave to that. Because instead of trying to debate her, instead of arguing with her, they just put up laughing emojis, and they was like, that's hilarious. Not even worth debating. Mm-hmm. Now, that claim might sound confident, but confidence does not equal correctness. If Arabs were the indigenous people of ancient Egypt, history would leave fingerprints everywhere, and it doesn't. Let's start with something basic. Names matter. The people of the Nile Valley did not call their land Egypt. That name comes from the Greek Aegyptos. The original name was Kemet, the black land, a reference to the rich black soil of the Nile Valley and the people who emerged from it. If Arabs were the indigenous Egyptians, they wouldn't call it Misir or Egypt. They would call it Kemet. Next, language. Ancient Egyptians did not speak Arabic. Arabic entered North Africa after the 7th century Arab Islamic conquest. The sacred language of ancient Egypt was the Meduneter, the divine speech. It predates Arabic by thousands of years. See, language carries memory. And Arabic is not an ancient Nile Valley language. Then there's the spiritual practice. The ancient Egyptians did not worship Allah. They honored Aset, Aser, Heru, Tahuti, Ma'at, principles of balance, justice, resurrection, and cosmic order. Islam, like Christianity before it, arrives long after the pyramids were already ancient. If Arabs were the original Egyptians, they wouldn't have arrived with a new God, a new language, and a new calendar. They would have continued the old ones. And that's the key point, people. That's the key point they try to avoid. Indigenous cultures don't replace themselves, they evolve. What happened in Egypt was conquest, Arabization, and religious transformation, not uninterrupted ancestry. Modern Egyptians can be many things at once: African, Arabized, Muslim, Christian, mixed, complex. Yeah. But complexity is not the same as erasure. Claiming ancient Egypt as Arab history is not pride, it's historical appropriation. And it follows the same colonial pattern we've seen for centuries. Take African civilization, strip them of their African context, and reassign them to someone else. Africa does not need validation from conquest narratives. The Nile Valley civilization was African, developed by African people before Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Europeans ever arrived. This isn't about hate. It's about accuracy. History doesn't bend to TikTok videos. It bends to archaeology, linguistics, genetics, and time. And time is very clear. Kemet was African. Medu Neter was African. Kemetic science and spirituality were African. Everything else came later. Children of the sun, know who you are, know where you come from, and don't let revisionism masquerade as truth. All right. It's the open eye. Moving right along. All right. Okay. Every few years now, the headlines recycle the same tired angle. George Zimmerman is struggling now. Unemployed, homeless, mentally unwell, unable to find peace. And suddenly, we're invited, no nudge, to feel sympathy. And let's be absolutely clear. Trayvon Martin never got to struggle as an adult. He never got to be unemployed. He never got to suffer publicly, privately, or quietly. Trayvon Martin never got to heal. Trayvon Martin never got to grow older, learn from mistakes, fall in love, or tell his own story. Because Trayvon Martin was 17 years old when his life was taken. Consequences do not equal justice. Discomfort does not balance a death. And regret does not resurrect a child. Yes, we can acknowledge mental health. Yes, we can recognize human suffering, but not that bastard. Acknowledgement is not absolution. Don't get it mixed. One person is alive to experience hardship. One person is alive to feel turmoil. One person is alive to be written about in headlines. Trayvon Martin is not. His family lost a son. They lost a future. They lost every possibility that comes with watching a child grow into a man. That part never changes. No matter how many years pass, no matter how many sympathy pieces get written, no matter how uncomfortable the truth makes people feel, a life was taken. Period. And no headline can rewrite that. Just an open eye, moving right along. All right. As you know, okay, I like to share a history Hey, Brother Bourne, I see you. And sometimes history that some young people may not know about, and some older people might have heard, but they didn't really know the story. The day the Hines brothers were not an accident of talent. They were a continuation of tradition. Gregory and Maurice Hines weren't discovered by Hollywood the way the myth likes to tell it. They were raised into greatness, shaped deliberately, lovingly, and relentlessly by a black family that understood something America often forgets. Excellence is taught. Born in the 1950s into a working class black family in Harlem, the brothers were trained by their father, Maurice Hines Sr., himself a dancer who recognized early that survival and freedom often came through mastery of craft. He didn't just let his sons dance, he trained them. Structure, repetition, discipline, respect for elders of the art. Before Gregory was 5 years old, the boys were already professionals, performing as the Hines kids. This wasn't child's play. This was labor. This was apprenticeship. By the early 1950s, while most children were learning how to sit still, Gregory and Maurice were standing on major stages, keeping time with adults, holding their own in an industry that chewed up black talent and discarded it without apology. And it was Sammy Davis Jr., a survivor of that same brutal system, who saw them and recognized not just talent, but lineage. Sammy didn't just applaud them, he protected them, mentored them, and helped guide them through an entertainment industry that rarely shielded young black performers from exploitation. That matters. Because without that guidance, black brilliance is often consumed rather than cultivated. Maurice and Gregory Hines were opposite in the most beautiful way. Maurice Hines was the architect, the choreographer, the teacher. He was the grounding force. He understood the history of tap, not just his movement, but his language. Tap was born from enslaved Africans forced to communicate through rhythm when drums were outlawed. It was resistance turned into art. Maurice carried that knowledge forward. He preserved it. He taught it. He insisted it be respected. Gregory Hines, on the other hand, was lightning. Unpredictable, electric, explosive. When Maurice built the foundation, Gregory set it on fire. He didn't just dance on rhythm. He danced around it, against it, inside it. He made tap modern, cinematic, dangerous, and cool in a time when America was ready to dismiss it as old-fashioned. Gregory didn't let tap die. He reintroduced it to a new generation. Together, they bridged eras. They carried the torch from Bill Bojangles Robinson and the Nicholas Brothers into a modern black aesthetic that refused nostalgia without evolution. Broadway, the Apollo, Las Vegas, television, film, they were everywhere, but never diluted. Gregory's later career took him into film and theater history. The Cotton Club, where black elegance and danger shared the same frame. White Nights, where he stood toe-to-toe with ballet and proved tap belonged on the world stage. A Tony Award, multiple Emmy nominations, the National Medal of Arts. But none of that existed without Maurice. Behind every accolade was brotherhood, rooted in trust, accountability, discipline, and love. No ego, no myth of the lone genius. Just two black men raised to understand that greatness is communal, not individual. This wasn't overnight success. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a viral moment. This was legacy. built step by step, tapped out beat by beat, passed down from father to sons, protected by elders, refined through sacrifice. In a culture obsessed with fame, the Hind brothers remind us of a deeper truth. Greatness doesn't always come from nowhere. Sometimes it comes from home. Sometimes it comes from family. Sometimes it comes from knowing exactly who you are and whose shoulders you're standing on. Gregory and Maurice Hines didn't just entertain us, they educated, preserved, and advanced Black art. And that makes them not just stars, but ancestors in motion. This is the open eye. You got any music? No, my music still ain't there, y'all. Don't you worry about it. Let me see what I got here. All right. Oh, well. Let's move right along here. You heard of the term uppity? Yeah. Let's deal with that. During segregation, Black people were not just separated from white society. They were subjected to a regime of daily, calculated humiliation, so thorough it bordered on psychological warfare. Jim Crow wasn't merely about keeping races apart. It was about enforcing submission, fear, and ritualized degradation. A Black man could be arrested for reckless eyeballing. Some were convicted. That meant looking at a white person too long, too directly, or without visible deference. Your eyes, your very gaze, could be interpreted as aggression. And that accusation alone could cost you your freedom or your life. You know that Black people were expected to step off of sidewalks, lower their heads, remove their hats, and avert their eyes when white people passed. In courtrooms, Black witnesses had to address white boys as sir. A grown-ass Black man could be beaten or killed for calling a white man by his first name. Respect flowed in only one direction. In some southern towns, Black people were forbidden from trying on clothes in department stores. You could buy them, but not touch them to your body. Libraries, parks, swimming pools, hospitals, cemeteries, segregated. Even Bibles were segregated in courtrooms so Black people could not swear oath on the same book as white people. And then there were the barrels placed on the street. How many of you know about this? If something struck a Black person as funny, if laughter escaped unguarded, they were expected to stick their head into a barrel and laugh into it so no white person could imagine they were being laughed at. Even joy had to be muted. Even happiness was dangerous. That's where the term laughing barrel comes from. If something struck you funny, yeah, go stick your head in the barrel. So as not to endanger your life because you laughed at a white person. But perhaps the most dangerous label of all was uppity. That's still there. To be called uppity meant you forgot your place. It meant you spoke too confidently. You dressed too well, educated yourself too thoroughly, or refused to bow deeply enough. Uppity Black people, and you know that's not what they called you, were seen as threats. not because they were violent, but because they were self-possessed. And the punishment for being uppity was often swift and brutal. A black man who owned land, a black woman who talked back, a black veteran who wore his uniform proudly, a black child who excelled in school. Any one of them could be beaten, fired, falsely arrested, or lynched. And many were. Emmett Till was labeled uppity for allegedly whistling. Medgar Evers was labeled uppity for demanding voting rights. Ida B. Wells was labeled uppity for exposing lynching. Entire black communities like Tulsa's Greenwood district were destroyed for being too successful, too organized, too independent. Uppity was the code. It meant you are not afraid enough. It meant you are forgetting who we think you are. This system was not accidental, it was deliberate. It was deliberate social conditioning. A society engineered to force black people to police their own bodies, tone, posture, ambition, and silence under constant threat of violence. So when people today dismiss this history as ancient or irrelevant, understand what they are really doing. They are minimizing a trauma that was generational, institutional, and enforced at gunpoint. The demand now is not special treatment. It is restitution for stolen dignity. It is recognition of stolen humanity. It is the refusal to ever again accept humiliation as the price of survival. History didn't just happen, it was imposed. And the echoes of reckless eyeballing, sidewalk rituals, laughter barrels, and the deadly charge of being uppity still inform the present, whether America wants to admit it or not. This is the Open Eye, Patrice Gibbs. Moving right along. All right? All right. All right, y'all. I hear an open eye. Let's get right to it. Still dealing with that cold somewhat. My voice ain't quite got back yet, but y'all feel me. Hey, Brother Shamar. SD. Let me tell y'all, in case you haven't heard, Renee Nicole Good is dead. Let's sit with that for a moment. Because America only seems to sit up straight when a white woman dies. A white woman was shot. She lay there bleeding. A physician was on scene and attempted to give aid. And according to eyewitness accounts and video, an ICE agent told that doctor to his face that he did not care. An ambulance was delayed. Roads were blocked. Not by chaos, not by accident, but by ICE vehicles, federal agents preventing timely medical care. 15 minutes. In trauma medicine, 15 minutes is the difference between life and death. And now comes the question America never wants to answer honestly. Where's the outrage? Where's the outrage? Where are the mobs? Where are the breathless news cycles? Where are the politicians pounding podiums, screaming about law and order, about protecting women, about justice? Because we have seen this movie before. When a white woman is believed to have been harmed by a black person, sometimes without evidence, sometimes without truth, this country has historically erupted into violence. Where's the outrage? Emmett Till was tortured and murdered over an allegation. Entire black towns were burned over rumors. Lynch mobs didn't wait for facts. They didn't wait for courts. They didn't wait for video. But now we have video. We have witnesses. We have a dead woman. And we have a white federal agent at the center of it. Where's the outrage? Suddenly nothing. No mass mobilization, no righteous fury, no defending virtue. No city declared unlivable in revenge. Because the truth is uncomfortable. White outrage has never been about protecting white women. Let me tell you that again. White outrage has never been about protecting white women. It's been about policing black people. When the threat is imagined and black, the response is feral. When the threat is real and white, the response is silence. And that silence tells us everything. It tells us that Renee Nicole Good's whiteness did not protect her once the system turned its machinery inward. It tells us that the badge matters more than the body. It tells us that authoritarian power does not discriminate when it feels unaccountable. And this is why the rest of the world looks at America and shrugs when we say we didn't vote for this. Because whether we voted for it or not, we are tolerating it. Where's the outrage? ICE is no longer operating as a civil immigration agency. It is functioning as a domestic paramilitary force, unaccountable, shielded, emboldened. People are dying in custody. People are dying during encounters. People are being disappeared into detention centers with no transparency and no urgency. And it doesn't matter whether they are citizens or undocumented, straight, trans, black, brown, white, or foreign born. Power without accountability eventually consumes everyone. Let's say their names, because erasure is part of the violence. Keith Porter Jr. You heard of him? He was killed by an ICE agent in Los Angeles. Yeah. What do we got here? There you go. Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, killed during a traffic stop. Johanna Medina Leon, an Honduran trans woman who died in ICE custody. Zudi Zuwaldi, Ethiopian, dead in custody. Brian Gozon Rayo, Colombian, dead in custody. Esa Marlo Montijo, Filipino, dead in custody. Chung Wang An, Chinese, dead in custody. Sirius Fatali Shiavani, Pakistani, dead in custody. Yeah. Fahad Sadiq, Etruscan, dead in custody. John Wilson Brutus, Haitian, dead in custody. Nikolay Staniv Ganchev, Bulgarian, dead in custody. Neil Cruz Silva, Mexican, dead in custody. Every one of these lies matter. Every one of these stories deserve wall-to-wall coverage. Every family deserves justice, but America only seems capable of sustained outrage when it can be weaponized against the already oppressed. Ashley Babbitt will receive more institutional sympathy and death than many of these people ever received in life. And that tells you this has never been about law and order and morality. It's been about hierarchy. And here is the warning. One history keeps repeating. This machinery does not stop once it starts. If you think this is only about immigrants, you're lying to yourself. If you think it's only about those people, you're next in line. Authoritarian systems always expand their appetite. So ask yourself, not performatively, not for social media, not for content, but honestly, how many names will it take? How many videos will it take? How many bodies will it take before silence becomes complicity? Because this moment is not just about Renee Nicole Good. It's about whether Americans are willing to confront the truth that unchecked power wrapped in a flag is still tyranny. And history is watching who spoke and who stayed quiet. White supremacy always follows the same pattern. First, it targets black and brown people, especially black people, with relentless violence, lynchings, terror, laws, silence enforced at gunpoint. As long as white people benefit or believe they're safe, most say nothing. But history is clear. Once white people begin to object, once they stand beside the oppressed, once they challenge the system, white supremacy turns on them too. This is not a theory. This is the record. Look, after the Civil War, black people were granted citizenship. Black men were granted the right to vote. Piss white women off. But black men didn't just vote. They ran for office and they won. They went to Congress. They took seats in state legislatures. They began shaping law. White America responded with terror. That terror had a name. The Ku Klux Klan. And the Klan didn't only murder black people. James Hines, a U.S. congressman from Arkansas, spent his time educating newly freed black citizens about their civil rights. Most of us never heard of him. He was assassinated by the Klan in 1868, one of 6 members of Congress murdered. George Ashburn, a progressive judge and candidate for U.S. Senate in Georgia, supported Reconstruction and black suffrage. He was murdered by the Klan. Alexander Boyd, county solicitor in Alabama, defended the legal rights of black citizens. He was murdered by the Klan. During the civil rights movement, the pattern repeated. Yeah, I feel you, Rhonda. They can try that mess today. In 1964, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner went to Mississippi to fight segregation. They were abducted, tortured, and murdered by the Klan. with the cooperation of local law enforcement. And while the FBI searched the Mississippi woods for their bodies, they found the remains of 2 other black men that had been missing for months, killed by the same terror machine. Their names barely made the headlines. In 1965, during the Selma to Montgomery marches, a white woman named Viola Duuzi gave rise to civil rights protesters. She wasn't a leader. She wasn't armed. She was just helping, just trying to help. The Klan murdered her. And here's the part that matters most. We remember Viola Duuzi's name. I don't remember the names of the men who killed her. See, that's how history works. Being white in America has never guaranteed safety from state violence. It's only delayed it. The real protection in America has never been whiteness alone. It's whiteness plus silence. The moment you speak, the moment you object, the moment you stand with the people this system was built to crush, you are no longer protected. What happened to Renee Nicole Good shook people because it shattered a dangerous assumption that skin color alone would shield them. It never has. Power does not care what color you are when you challenge it. Authoritarian systems do not discriminate when they feel threatened. They escalate. And make no mistake, this will get worse. See, authoritarians always double down when they are weak. Always. History has never shown otherwise. So the real question is not whether you are afraid. Fear is normal. Bravery has never meant the absence of fear. Courage means being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. So you have to decide now, before they come to your door, whether you care more about being safe or about being just. Because the truth is uncomfortable, but unavoidable. What would you have done in 1965? Because that's exactly what the hell you would be doing right now. History doesn't ask who felt bad. It asks who stood up. And it always remembers the names of the brave, not the cowards who enforce terror. This is the open eye. Give me a second. Yeah. I'm right with you. Don't worry. Come on. Cap slipping. Give me a minute. Get right back to commentary here. All right, all right. All right. You know, white America is just now waking up to a reality black America has never had the luxury of sleeping through. The shock on white faces today is a moral outrageous betrayal. Betrayal by a system they believe was designed to protect them. A system they were taught only malfunctioned in rare cases. A system they trusted would never turn its full weight inward. But black people are known for generations that the U.S. government can kill you in broad daylight on camera, in front of witnesses, in front of your children, and then calmly explain that your death was necessary. They can label your body a threat, a terrorist, a suspect, a danger to society, and close the case before the blood even dries. They can promote the trigger pullers, protect the decision makers, and pension the accomplices. That is not new. That's American tradition. What's new is not the violence. What's new is who is finally being forced to see it. White Americans are not stunned by state brutality. They are stunned by proximity. The fear creeping into their voices isn't empathy, it's recognition. Recognition that the machinery they defended, excused, and normalized does not have a moral firewall. Recognition that power, once unrestrained, does not stop at color lines. It only starts there. For black people, there is no awakening. There's only confirmation. We were taught this lesson early. It was passed down through lynching postcards, through police batons, through COINTELPRO files, through slave patrols rebranded as law enforcement, through prisons built faster than schools, through surveillance framed as safety. We learned that legality is not morality, that law is not justice, that due process is a suggestion, not a guarantee, especially if the state decides your existence is inconvenient. This is why black communities were never surprised when video evidence failed to produce accountability. We're never shocked when body cameras went dark. And we're not confused when prosecutors stalled and grand jury shrugged. We understood something fundamental long before hashtags and viral footage. The system was not broken, it calibrated. Designed to control, designed to intimidate, designed to punish resistance, designed to define dissent as danger. And now, when that same system turns its gaze towards white people, towards journalists, protesters, whistleblowers, wrong kind of citizens, suddenly the language changes. Suddenly, it's authoritarian. Suddenly, it's un-American. Suddenly, people want to talk about civil liberties, state overreach, and constitutional limits. Black people don't get the luxury of suddenly. We were warning you while you were applauding. We were screaming while you were voting. We were burying our dead while you were trusting the badge. This woman is not about solidarity yet. It's about honesty. About admitting that America did not fall from grace, it revealed itself. That the violence you now fear was always foundational. That the monster was never hiding, it was just pointed elsewhere. So no, this isn't a system malfunctioning. This isn't a glitch. This isn't a deviation from American values. This is American power unmasked. This is policy without the courtesy of distance. It is the same design, just closer to home. And the question now isn't whether white America is awake. The question is whether it's finally ready to listen to the people who never had the option to sleep. Children of the sun, stay woke. What you have to understand is there is no peace with tyranny. There's no peace. Let's be clear about something America keeps lying to itself about. There is no peace with tyranny. There's no justice negotiated from the barrel of unchecked power. There's no safety when the very institution claiming to protect you is the one killing you, lying about it, and erasing evidence afterward. What happened in Minneapolis is not an incident. It's a revelation. Mayor Frey said, I should get the F out. And he's right. Because when an armed federal agency rolls into a city, terrorizes residents, rips families apart, kills someone, and then retreats behind federal immunity, that is not law enforcement. That's occupation. Governor Walz didn't say the word war casually. He said it because language has finally caught up to reality. When the federal government treats a state's residents as enemy combatants, bypasses local authority, and shields its agents from accountability, you are no longer dealing with governance. You're dealing with raw power asserting itself. Here's the part America refuses to confront. Peaceful protest has never been the mechanism that forced tyranny into retreat. Peaceful protest is what happens after power fears consequences. This country did not exist because colonialists held hands and sang freedom songs. Labor rights weren't won by asking politely, and civil rights were not granted out of moral awakening. They were conceded because instability became too costly. And that doesn't mean violence is the goal. It means obedience is not the answer. Tyranny does not surrender power because you quote the Constitution at it. It surrenders when it realizes legitimacy is collapsing, authority is challenged, and compliance is no longer guaranteed. And let's stop pretending Jefferson's words are some extremist outlier. The people who quote him on the 4th of July love the poetry, but they hate the implications. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. See, they want that quote without the courage, the mythology without the responsibility, and the freedom without the risk. What Minnesota represents right now is not rebellion, it's exposure. Exposure of a federal apparatus governing through fear. Exposure of a political system that calls dissent terrorism while executing state violence as procedure. The question is not whether things have gone too far. The question is how far power is allowed to go before Americans admit what this actually is. Because history is clear on one point. Every empire insists it's maintaining order right up until the moment the blood of tyranny spills on the ground. Every tyrant calls resistance dangerous. And every generation that inherits freedom without sacrifice eventually forget what it costs in blood. This is Dope and I. Patrice Gibbs. We're moving right along. All right. Brother Haru. Sister Tracy. Brother Fred. All right, all right. Yeah. Oh, the ice shooter has a name. And the cover-up is collapsing in real time. The federal government didn't want you to know his name. They hid it, delayed it, buried it while the streets of Minneapolis burned with grief and rage. And now we know. Jonathan David Ross, 10-year law enforcement veteran. ICE enforcement and removal operations, special response team. This is the man who shot and killed Renee Nicole Good, a 37-year-old mother of 3 on a Minneapolis street. And once his name surfaced, so did the lies. Here we go. Because when the government rushed to justify killing a woman, they didn't just defend the shooter, they manufactured a narrative. They called Renee Good a domestic terrorist. They invoked trauma. They waved around a prior incident to excuse lethal force. And they shut out Minnesota authorities. They locked down the information. And they told the public to trust them and stand down. Don't be a fool. Because the video doesn't lie. Renee Good was trying to leave. Her red SUV was turning away. An agent approached from the passenger side, phone in hand, moved toward the front of the vehicle, and fired 4 shots as the car pulled off. He recorded this. She crashed moments later. She never made it home to her children. That wasn't no shootout. That wasn't self-defense. That was not counterterrorism. That was terrorism. That's deadly force used to stop a car that was leaving. And here's where the story gets uglier. The same prior incident being used to justify her death. The 2025 Bloomington arrest when an agent was dragged by a car was misrepresented by the administration itself. Mr. Eyeliner, J.D. Vance, claimed the agent needed 33 stitches in the leg. That's a goddamn lie. Court records show the injuries were to Ross's arm and hand. He wasn't even hurt. Details matter when someone is dead. Truth matters when the government is asking for impunity. Instead of clarity, we got character assassination. Sound familiar? Instead of transparency, we got stonewalling. Instead of accountability, we got a federal defense campaign. Renee Good is labeled a hero. Jonathan Ross is labeled a terrorist. Jonathan Ross is framed as a hero. Local officials are warned to shut up. Governor Walz said it plainly. It feels very difficult that when we get a fair outcome, that's the scandal. Not just that a mother is dead, but that the system moved faster to protect her murderer than investigate the killing. And now we know something else. After her shooting, Ross reportedly called Renee Good a effing bitch. That's not fear. That's contempt. That is what unchecked federal power looks like. That is what narrative control looks like. This is what happens when accountability is optional. Oh, we got his name now. The federal government has no place to hide. A mother is dead. Her children are without her. And the truth is still being buried under badges and press statements. And it's amazing to watch the press stand there and listen to these people lie. Damn. The question is whether justice still exists when the killer wears a uniform. The question isn't whether the public should be angry. Of course the public is angry. But the narrative is allowed to go forward. Our press is weak as hell. I almost said it was weak as something else. And let me tell you where this is going. I'm going to move on. All right. Europeans generally believe that they are destined to rule forever. I started out, who was that? Jorge, the Vanguard. There's a bad white dude. You don't get on Europeans, no breaks. Europeans generally believe they are destined to rule forever. That belief is not confidence. It's historical illiteracy wrapped in supremacy mythology. No civilization collapses because it suddenly loses power. Empires do not fall because they are weak. They collapse because they misunderstand time, violate balance, and confuse dominance with permanence. Supremacy doctrines, whether racial, cultural, or ideological, always make the same false claims. That hierarchy is natural, that one group is destined to rule, that dominance can be eternal. History shows the exact opposite. Supremacy is not a fact. Supremacy is an opinion enforced through violence, extraction, and coercion. And violence can be sustained control, but it cannot sustain civilization. See, it's the fear of the circle. That's why Europe fears cyclical time, because it exposes the lie that linear time tells. Linear time says Europe is the future. Everyone else is the past. Cyclical time says there is no permanent future without balance. Rise and fall are not moral judgments. They are structural realities. Ancient civilizations across pre-colonial Africa, Asia, and the Americas understood this. Time was not a straight line marching toward European dominance. Time was a circle, regeneration, decay, renewal. Europe cannot accept this because cyclical time means decline is inevitable. And inevitability terrifies supremacy. Every civilization, without exception, follows a recognizable pattern. Stage 1, innovation and balance. Knowledge expands. Social cohesion exists. Institutions serve the people. On your stage 2, expansion and extraction. Territory grows. Resources are exploited. Power concentrates outward. Stage 3, centralization and inequality. Wealth pools at the top. The gap between rulers and ruled widen. Stage 4, overreach and rigidity. Dissent is suppressed. Ecological limits are ignored. Militarization replaces wisdom. Control replaces resilience. Stage 5, collapse and reorganization. Systems break, structures fail, power reconfigures. No empire escapes this cycle, none. Let me tell you where white supremacy fails. White supremacy excels at stage 4, like a cancer. It hoards resources. It dehumanizes others. It suppresses dissent. It ignores ecological limits. It mistakes dominance for sustainability. It confuses rage for resilience and control for strength. That always fails. Rome did not fall because it was weak. It overextended. Europe did not dominate because it was enlightened. It exhausted land and labor. Colonial empires collapsed because they drained the very systems, ecological, human, spiritual, that made life possible. White supremacy produces short-term dominance and long-term ruin. I'll tell you about the contrast. Ancient Kemet offers the counterexample. Egypt endured not because it conquered endlessly, but because it balanced. Not because it hoarded, but because it circulated. Not because it crushed the poor, but because it protected the bottom, understanding that collapse begins there. Malat, truth, order, reciprocity, balance was not symbolic. It was governance. Egypt understood that regeneration prevents collapse and humility sustains longevity. That is why Egypt endured while empires built on supremacy burned out. Inedible conclusion. Europeans are not the future, humanity is. Supremacy will always fail because it fights nature, memory, and time itself. And time always wins. All right? Man fears time. What does time fear? The pyramids. Europe will continue denying the cycle until reality forces recognition. That is how every empire ends. Not with revelation, but with refusal. History does not reward dominance. History rewards balance. And balance is the one thing supremacy can never achieve. Just an open eye, moving right along. Yeah, I know I'm over time, y'all. Don't worry about it. Okay. Now, Burkina Faso. It's at the center of a major global story, and the weak-ass Western media is barely even whispering about it. On January 5th, 2026, Burkina Faso government foiled yet another attempted coup. By some counts, I think it's the 23rd attempt against this country's leadership. And let that number sink in. 23 attempts to destabilize a nation that has dared to say one simple thing: we want control of our own future. And what happened next matters just as much as the coup itself. Let me tell you, thousands of people poured into the streets in support of their president and leadership. Ordinary citizens showed up and sent a clear message: oh, hell no. Foreign powers are not going to overthrow our government and drag us back into subjugation. Now, context is everything. Why would Western powers be so interested in Burkina Faso? Because Burkina Faso, alongside Mali and Niger, formed a new alliance, expelled French troops, and openly declared a goal that terrifies former colonial powers: total sovereignty. Not symbolic independence, not flag and anthem independence, real control. Control of borders, control of policy, and most importantly, control of resources. Gold sits at the center of this struggle. The Burkina government has begun revoking mining permits, renegotiating contracts, and reclaiming control over gold extraction, arguably correctly that the wealth beneath their soil should benefit Burkina Faso, not foreign corporations or collapsing European economies. That gold, they say, should fund security, development, and national stability, not be siphoned off while the people remain poor. The hell with that. So when authorities describe coup attempts as foreign interference, this isn't paranoia. This is pattern recognition. Whatever your personal opinion of the leadership, and reasonable people can debate leadership, Western nations have no moral or legal right to invade, manipulate, or destabilize foreign governments to protect their economic interests. Full stop. People have the right to govern themselves. People have the right to control their own resources. People have the right to write their own future. Is this woman messy? Yeah. Is it complicated? Absolutely. Are there risks? Of course. But what this attempted coup and the public's response reveals is something much bigger. The sovereignty message is resonating across the global south. People are tired of living under the boot of so-called civilizing powers who extracted wealth, destabilized regions, and then had the audacity to call themselves benevolent. The hell out of here. The myth of the Western savior collapses under even a casual glance at history. What we know right now is this. There were arrests, mass rallies, new alliances, and sweeping mining reforms. We know people in Burkina Faso are saying plainly, we will mine our own gold. We will sell our own resources, and the benefits will go to our own people. And when imperial forces, watching their own economy strain, move to undermine that effort, the correct response is resistance. If you believe in self-determination, you stand with Burkina Faso. If you believe in sovereignty, you stand with Burkina Faso's people. Because no nation should have to fight off coup after coup simply for insisting on the right to exist on its own goddamn terms. People deserve to protect and write their own future. It's the open eye. Yeah. You know, it's something, usually after I sign off the air, and as I'm signing off of Facebook, got this from Sarah Susan Seven. Gas. And I always say that. Global African supremacy is coming. Africa time has come. And this time is real. Let me tell you something. Every once in a while, a truth slips out of the mouth of someone with global credentials, Western credentials, academic prestige, and access to rooms where empires whisper. And when that truth confirms what African people have been saying for 500 years, you stop and listen. Jeffrey Sachs, journalist and commentator, he said it plainly. Africa's time has come. And he didn't stutter. Now understand what makes that statement dangerous, because it wasn't poetic. It wasn't symbolic. It was strategic. It was historical. And it was an admission. And Sachs went further and said the quiet part out loud. It was stopped before from the outside. Stopped by a bullet in Patrice Lumumba's head. Stopped by CIA and M16. Stopped by assassinations and sanctions and debt traps and destabilization engineered in London, Paris, and Washington. In other words, Africa wasn't underdeveloped. Africa was under attack. And that era is over. Global African supremacy is coming. And don't confuse it with white supremacy. Let's get something straight right now. Don't you confuse global African supremacy with white supremacy. Because white supremacy is built on fear, on scarcity, on domination, on the lie that someone else rising means you must fail. African supremacy, African leadership is built on balance, abundance, and harmony. See, when Africa ruled, the world was not organized around endless war and extraction. It was organized around trade, knowledge, spirituality, ecology, and shared prosperity. Africa did not rule from hunger. Africa ruled from fullness. And now history is correcting itself. And the signs are everywhere. And the West knows it. Look around. The rise of the Sahel Alliance, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. The leadership of Ibrahim Traoré, openly rejecting French domination and reclaiming African resources. The realignment towards BRIC and away from the IMF and the World Bank. The steady decline of Western dominance, militarily, economically, and morally, because they ain't never had no goddamn morals, and that's not a coincidence, that is convergence. And here's the part that terrifies the old empires. They can't stop it. Britain is a fading museum. France is a burning credit card. And the United States is a divided, decaying empire sprinting toward the cliff of its own contradictions. They no longer had the military power to recolonize Africa. They no longer had the economic leverage to dominate Africa. They no longer controlled the narrative. Africans from Ghana to Burundi, from Senegal to Ethiopia are rewriting the story in real time. For the first time in 600 years, the wind is blowing in Africa's direction. Not because the West wants it, but because they can't stop it. The future is young, black, and global. Sachs says something else that matters deeply. Africa's young people are the greatest asset on earth. He wasn't lying. The median age in Europe is 44. The median age in America is 39. The median age in Africa, it's 19. Half the continent is under 25. That's not a crisis. That's not a burden. That's power. A billion black minds, a billion innovators, a billion workers, a billion creators ready to build the next century. Sachs said, invest in them. And by 2050, Africa becomes a high-income region. I'll go further. Africa will be the engine of the world economy. Africa will be the cradle of new technologies. Africa will be the geopolitical center of gravity, not a global victim, but a global leader. Pan-Africanism is back, and this time it's bulletproof. Yeah. The first wave of Pan-Africanism gave us Nkrumah, Lumumba, Nyerere, Sankara, Cabral. The West assassinated them, overthrew them, or poisoned their revolutions. But this time, Africa is not alone. Africa is not unarmed. Africa is not economically isolated. Africa is not beholden to the International Monetary Fund's chains or NATO guns. This time, Africa has BRICS, satellites, digital currencies, new alliances, and a generation that refuses to be tricked, divided, or pacified by hashtags and hollow handshakes. Pan-Africanism is no longer just a dream. It's a strategy, it's a movement, and now is a geopolitical reality. The rebirth of a continent. Jeffrey Sachs said Africa will become a region of peace, a region of partnership, a region of innovation, and he's right. Because when climate change accelerates, Africa holds the cobalt in the solar fields. When technology expands, Africa holds the youth. When global finance shifts, Africa holds the minerals for batteries, AI, supercomputers, and satellites. By 2050, the continent mocked today will be the continent courted tomorrow. The future is not Silicon Valley. It's not Paris. It's not London. It sure as hell ain't Washington. The future is Lagos, Dakar, Nairobi, Addis, Accra, where leadership forged in fire, sovereignty, and self-respect. And don't get it mixed. Because our brothers, sisters, and cousins in the motherland love the children of the diaspora. And as they gain power and turn their eyes towards the subjugation that we suffer here, they will say, enough is enough. That's my brother. For centuries, the world extracted Africa's wealth while suppressing Africa's voice. But now the world is being forced to admit what we've always known. Africa was never behind. Africa was held back. Now the chains are breaking. The youth are rising. The alliances are forming. And the clock of history is completing its full circle. And those in diaspora are bringing their talent home. Africa's time has come, and this time nobody can stop it. Africa is the future, young population, natural resources, unmatched creativity. Not from lack, not for competition, from survival, but from abundance. Global Africa supremacy. It's inevitable. Family, as we close the day, remember this. Truth doesn't need permission, and justice doesn't wait for comfort. Everything we talked about today, power, resistance, memory, accountability, it all comes down to one thing: who controls the narrative and who benefits from the silence. History doesn't move because people suddenly grow a conscience. History moves because ordinary people refuse to look away. If today's conversation made you uncomfortable, good. Growth doesn't come from ease, it comes from clarity. And clarity is dangerous to systems built on lies. So wherever you go after this broadcast, your job, your classroom, your neighborhood, your family conversations, carry the questions with you. Question authority, question tradition, question anything that demands your obedience, but cannot justify your humanity. We are not here to be spectators. We are here to be witnesses, and when necessary, participants. This is the open eye reminding you that seeing clearly is an act of resistance. All right? All right. This is the open eye. I hope you learned something today, because I learned something before I got here. Yes, indeed. And as we always tell you, destiny determines who enters your life. You decide who stays. Therefore, value those who value you, and don't treat those as a priority who treat you as an option. I'm Patrice Gibbs. This is The Open Eye. Peace. All right. Do I need to say it today? Global African supremacy. Peace.